I am hopeful in my heart and furious in my soul. And so as I'm walking through this disastrous time of democracy, where we're having to rise up time and time and time again, being sure that you embrace both the joy and the fury of the moment.
Welcome to the Practivist Pod, the practice of activism made practical.
Today we talk about the Republican death bill that is on the move and now cuts Medicare too, and bogus charges filed against a Democratic Congressmember for doing her constitutionally mandated job.
And then I have a conversation about the real policies that uplift our families and the frightening roots of this MAGA pronatalist movement with the co-founder and executive director of MomsRising, Kristin Rowe-Finkbeiner.
I'm Jessica Craven.
I'm Steve Pearson.
Hold on, stay strong, it won't be long, yeah, we will build a better world.
I want to start this week by acknowledging a couple of really sad pieces of news that we got in the last day or two. Obviously, just this morning we learned that Representative Connolly passed away after having received word in the last, recent past that his cancer had resurged. So our condolences go out to his family and loved ones. And also, of course, we heard of the really sad news about President Biden's, former President Biden. Do I call him president or former president? Anyway.
Yeah. He'll always be President Biden.
President Biden, yeah. His cancer diagnosis, or that he has stage 4 aggressive cancer, and obviously that is very, very, very sad to hear. And again, my thoughts and prayers literally are with his family, and I know yours are as well, Steve.
Mine too. Thank you for acknowledging that. And it's just been a tough, tragic week with news like that. And, we want to get right into this because we have so much to talk about. But, as we are recording this, the Republicans are still trying to push in the dead of night, of course, because they are very ashamed about this bill and they don't want anyone to know the details. In fact, I don't think many of them actually know the details of this bill. But you aptly describe it, the Republican death bill, because people are going to die. Yeah. The Congressional Budget Office put out some numbers on this, showing that it would make the poorest much poorer and the richer and the richest much richer, which is exactly what they've been trying to do. And as we mentioned in our open, a couple of times on this show when we've talked about this bill, I've because I'm great with the malapropisms and getting stuff confused, I've said Medicaid instead of Medicare or Medicare instead of Medicaid. Guess what? They both apply now because even though Trump said don't touch Medicaid, and they're saying that they're not going to cut any of those programs, both of those programs are being cut drastically. And that's going to lead to a lot of people not getting health care, a lot of hospitals closing, and literal people dying because of this hateful death bill.
Yeah, it is. It almost feels like Republicans are trying to, I know we've said this a lot, but it literally feels like they're trying to destroy the country. Like you feel like an enemy to the country is in charge. That someone is gleefully dismantling our country's infrastructure to help an enemy. Like, it just feels, you sort of fall into these paranoid fantasies where you're like, this is like someone else is just trying to destroy us. Like, this is going to destroy our healthcare system. What they are doing is the largest cut to the social safety net, I believe, in American history since we've had the social safety net. Biggest cuts to Medicaid in the history of the program. And now $500 billion from Medicare it's staggering. It's staggering. It is a staggering assault on our healthcare system.
Yeah. Massive cuts to food assistance programs.
Almost $300 billion.
Literally taking food out of the mouths of children, seniors, and veterans. Yeah. And to your point, it's hard to figure out, like, why anyone would pass this other than just, cruelty and, like you said, dismantling of our government and being very, anti-American. The only reason I can say that anyone would want to do this is because they are greedy and want power and are sucking up to the richest folks who are keeping them in office or will give them cushy, high-paying jobs once they leave office.
Right. Yeah,
So,
it's basically we want our tax cuts, and literally we don't care what we have to do to get them. We don't care. And, I keep hearing people in my comments talk about eugenics. Oh, the Republicans have a whole eugenics plan. And I used to just think, all right, come on, you're being a nut. I literally am getting to a point where I'm like, maybe they do want us all to die. I don't know anymore. But it does seem like they literally could not care less whether the poorest Americans and even working Americans live or die. They just don't seem to care.
It's interesting you would say that because I had a great conversation with the executive director of MomsRising and coming up in a little bit. And, we talk about this pronatalist movement, which a lot of us don't really know much about because, it's not in our particular bubble. The algorithm doesn't give us a lot of the trad mom stuff, and it's really scary, but its roots are in, Nazi Germany. Its roots are in eugenics. And this is the policies that are in Project 2025 that is, surprise, surprise, led by men, not women.
Of course. Yeah.
But it's really scary. So I think there is a correlation there, and probably a really, really terrifying one where the Black and brown people are disproportionately get harmed by all of these actions, and they're disproportionately going to suffer the consequences with healthcare and just like we've talked about, Black women's maternal health is way lower than any other woman in our country, and rather than address that, they're going to make it much, much worse. So,
but yet they want to keep forcing them to have babies. It's very confusing to me. That is the part I don't get. Like, I would get if it were sort of consistent across the board. Like, we don't want Black and brown people to have babies, and we will not care for them when they're alive. But it's like, we do want you to have babies, but then we won't care for you. So
they're proposing a medal. If you have over a certain amount of children, if you're a mom, you get a medal, and that's straight out of Nazi Germany. As well. Yeah.
Good times. Good times, Steve.
Good times. Pretty bleak. Last week I said we were going to lighten it up and talk about our top 10 rom-coms. We don't have time for top 10, but I'm just going to recommend Crazy Stupid Love out there. I'm going to digress and say Steve Carell, Emma Stone, breakout role, Juliette Moore, of course, Ryan Gosling, everyone's favorite. Crazy Stupid Love. Okay. I think that was from the early 2000s, but
I've got, is Handmaid's Tale a rom-com? That's the one I've got. Apparently Taylor Swift just donated a song to the latest season of Handmaid's Tale. Good for her.
Overrated, unpopular Taylor Swift.
That's right.
Her and Bruce Springsteen both.
Yeah. I read a fascinating thing about I can't remember if it was Jay Kuo or some great writer talking about how every time something really embarrassing happens to the Republicans, Trump drops a Taylor Swift tweet. And it was right after their bill failed in one of the committees this week that he dropped his latest one. And the press keeps falling for it. Everybody goes, oh my God, Trump just talked about Taylor Swift, and stops talking about the thing that is happening that is embarrassing to Trump. So notice it. Next time something really bad happens for Trump, watch for a Taylor Swift post, and we'll see if we can really sort of establish this correlation. I believe it.
There's so many things that are just like on their face stupid that comes out of this administration and comes out of Trump. But don't dismiss them as stupid because it's been effective. Obviously, he managed to build a coalition and win the last election. Sure. Yeah. And we got some interesting data back on that from Catalyst just yesterday, I think, too, which we won't talk about now, but we'll dig deep into that in a future podcast.
Yeah.
But, it makes me think about the next thing that we wanted to talk about was some of these full-blown authoritarian things that are happening with Representative LaMonica McIver being charged and Kristi Noem being grilled
just not
basically
knowing
saying
the
that
basic
habeas corpus-
fundamentals. Sorry, go on.
So, okay, not knowing the basic fundamentals, yes, but that's the stupidity on the face of it. But I think that this is by design. So here's exactly what she said. Senator Maggie Hassan asked Secretary Kristi Noem, Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus? And her answer was, well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
That's
That was
right.
That was her reply. Obviously,
Where's the big
completely wrong. Completely wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
But is she dumb? Or is this the administration's new talking point? They obviously are thwarting any kind of legal stuff. They're in, outright defiance of the Constitution and of the law.
And of court
They
orders.
are in the arrest of Representative McIver, who was at the ICE facility where the Newark mayor was arrested, doing her constitutionally mandated job of oversight, which she is legally entitled to do.
Yep.
She was charged with assault when, that mayor, I'm blanking on his last name, I'm sorry, was arrested.
Bakara.
Bakara, thank you.
Mayor Bakara, yeah.
So, they don't really care about the law. What they do care about is public sentiment.
Yeah.
Because if they, right now, the public sentiment is in the toilet. Like, we are rising up, we are making noise. But if they can somehow convince people that, oh, what I thought habeas corpus was
Right.
completely different. It's actually something that allows the president to deport anyone he wants, then they're, chipping away again at facts and of a abject reality. So, I really believe that's what Kristi Noem is doing here. This is the new talking point in their plan to rid us of our rights once and for all and get rid of habeas corpus and any kind of due process so they can just lock up and charge representatives who they disagree with, folks who are standing up at, protests and really, it's a fear-based authoritarian slant that's very terrifying.
Yeah.
Again, Crazy Stupid Love. It's a fun palate cleanser. Steve Carell, you can't go wrong.
Handmaid's Tale. It's our life. No, it's not really.
Yeah.
But well, that's cheery. I mean, look, it is. They are trying very, very hard to persuade Americans that you don't really need those pesky rights. They're overrated, and you never really had them anyway, which we did. But they're trying to sort of rewrite reality. Yes, as you said, it's very Orwellian. And it is our job, those of us sort of fighting for what is right, to keep insisting on facts and truth. They matter. And, I'm sure you've seen the same polling I've seen. Americans don't like this. Across the board, we say Americans are stupid. In some ways, there are some very uneducated Americans, but I think that by and large, Americans do understand more or less what their rights are. They understand what's in the Constitution. They do understand that due process is a central part of our foundational, these are our rights. And they're not comfortable with the fact that the Trump administration is dispensing with them. I think the problem is more that they are not always aware that that is happening because they're too busy.
Right. Living their lives. They're too busy living their lives too. They're too busy. I try to give grace to a lot of folks who are working couple of jobs,
3 jobs
and struggling to get by, and they're exhausted at the end of the day, and they've got their families and they're spending time with their kids, and they're just not tuned in. That speaks to the larger question of how do we reach these people who are outside of obviously the traditional media ecosystem. And now I'm really digressing, but we have so much to talk about.
We have a lot to talk about
in future podcasts. But in terms of the stuff around habeas corpus and the authoritarian I was going to say slant, but we're in full authoritarian mode right now
sure. No slant.
with this wannabe king.
Yeah.
I will give a spoiler alert. Next week, we will have Representative Raskin on the show. Yeah. And these are excellent questions to ask him as a constitutional scholar and someone on the front lines. So we'll be talking about all this next week, too.
Well, where do we go from here, Steve?
Well, I'll tell you what we do, and this is in a few weeks. It's kind of around the corner, but June 14th is the big No Kings protest on Flag Day, and also on the day that Trump is having a military-style parade for his own birthday, which is costing millions of dollars.
$50 million. $50 million. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
50 millions as we are, having, cutting food for children and seniors. He's spending $50 million on a parade for himself. So, we're going to get out on the street, and that parade will absolutely be dwarfed by the protests. I am certain of it. But if you don't know about this already, mark your calendars. June 14th, the No Kings protest. Indivisible is one of the groups that's leading this. We'll have the link in our show notes where you can sign up and find a protest. Find a protest near you.
I think it's just nokings.org. So go to nokings.org and just sign up. It is imperative that everybody get out for this protest. It's got to be bigger than Hands Off. We did Hands Off, then we did May Day, which was slightly smaller. We need to be going in the opposite direction. We need to be bigger, and there are many reasons why protesting in the street is vital right now. We have to show the world that we are not accepting what's happening right now. We have to show each other that we're not accepting it. We have to show our lawmakers that we will not accept it, and that this cuts across parties, it cuts across demographics, it cuts across every zip code, that this is not okay and we will not accept it. It's really, really important. If you've never protested in your life, this is the one to go to.
This is the one.
This is it. Please. I will be there. Steve will be there. We will all be there.
If anything, just, don't you want to celebrate the anti-Trump birthday party, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah. Don't you want to distract from his parade? You got to help.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing, in terms of this death bill, it's all happening right now. Don't let up on the phone calls. It's the Freedom Caucus is meeting as we're recording this, probably with Trump. They are holding things up and saying that it's going to be a couple of days at least before they're going to be able to get it through committee. It may go up to a full floor vote in the next day or two. It could go up today. Maybe Trump gets it resolved as we're recording this. We don't really know. But keep calling. It goes to the Senate next. I don't know who our McCain is going to be, but it's not over yet, and we still have leverage that we can push back on, and your phone calls will really make a difference.
Yeah, they'll make a big difference, and a couple of things on that. First of all, I really am curious why it is the Freedom Caucus that is getting the upper hand here, and not the moderate Republicans, of whom there are many who know they will lose their seats over this, and I don't understand why they are not saying, we can't do these cuts. But they're not. Yeah. And so when you call them, let them know that you see that they are not listening to you, that they are being cowards, and that instead what we're hearing is, the bill may not pass right now because it's not bad enough. That is insane. Right. So that's one thing. And also, it's important for people to understand, because why would we understand the intricacies of a reconciliation bill? But once it passes in the House, it's going over to if it passes in the House, which is not a foregone conclusion, but assuming it does, it then goes over to the Senate, where the Senate is going to rewrite it completely. Like, they're already saying, this is not the bill we're going to pass. So they're going to rewrite it. Then they have to pass it, which weeks this is going to take. And then that has to come back and pass in the House. So I say all of that just to say that if this passes this week, do not despair. We have a long way to go. And the good news, the silver lining on this, is that if moderate Republicans vote for this bill, we are going to hang that over their necks, or around their necks.
Absolutely.
Come next year. Yep. Even if the bill doesn't pass, they will have doomed their electoral chances by voting for this bill. So they're kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't. Good, as they should be, because they're in a sucky party that sucks. I said it twice. Sucks and sucks. So
they're damned.
They're
Yes.
damned. They're going to be hoist on their own petard, as it were. I love that expression.
I love that phrase.
It's
Me
good.
too. I love that one.
It's not common, but we like it. We like to keep it in the parlance. So,
Yes.
but don't despair and explain to your friends and family, because man, I'll tell you, even I was at a big gathering this weekend, and even people who are educated were like, well, once it passes in the House, it's done, right? The bill, then Medicaid cuts happen. I'm like, no. So this is going to play out over weeks and weeks, probably till the end of July. And we're going to fight every step of the way. So know that.
Hell yeah.
And tell your friends. Okay, rant over.
Hell yeah. Love it. That's
Thank
what
you.
this show is for. It's for ranting and for movie recommendations. If you want something a little bit more
boy.
hardcore, Goodfellas, classic Scorsese. All right, I'll stop.
Okay.
I
won't stop you from stopping.
Oh, digressing is my favorite. Well, let's talk. So speaking of digressing,
Yeah.
as I said, we have a great interview with Kristin Rowe-Finkbeiner from MomsRising, and in honor of belated Mother's Day, by the way, happy belated Mother's Day to you,
Thank you.
as well, Jess.
Yeah.
I thought mixing up our What Gives Us Hope section for the week, we would talk about some best advice that we got from our moms, or how that's applying to our lives now. So,
That's a very nice idea.
Jess, what do you think? What do you got?
Well, my mom is great. So I'm very fortunate in my mother. She's amazing, wonderful, very loving, very compassionate, very giving woman. But when you asked me that question, I thought immediately of a conversation I had with my mom when my kid first came out as non-binary. So this was when they were 11. And they came to me and said, we already knew that they were queer. They had come out when they were 9 and said, I get crushes on girls, not boys. Great. But they then said, I'm going to use they, them pronouns. I think I identify as non-binary. And my first reaction was, maybe a little less graceful than I would have liked. I thought maybe they were too young to make such a determination. I wasn't sure how, I just didn't know what to do. I was very new to the concept of someone being non-binary. And so MJ was upset because I wasn't immediately embracing the idea. And I called my mom. I was upset. And my mom just said, Jessica, what are you doing? It's your kid. Love them. Just love them. Just love them. Who cares? Love them for who they are. And at that moment, I remember exactly where I was sitting. I remember just thinking, oh my God, she's absolutely right. And from that moment forward, I went back in and said to MJ, God, whoever you are, however you identify, we will go with it. We will try to learn about this. And yes, of course. And since then, of course, MJ has been just thriving. And that is, that's really due more to any good parenting on my part than it is due to my mother's good parenting. So there you go, Mom. That's for you. What about you, Steve?
I love that.
Yeah.
My mom, I used to think was Pollyanna-esque in her always like, just be happy and look at the bright side of things. And I have come to learn that is a choice that my mom has made. She's been through a lot of tragedy in her life. We had a notably a big family tragedy when I was about 7, and her brother, along with another uncle and cousin of mine were on a fishing trip, and they were in a small plane that crashed, and they were all killed.
Whoa.
And that had huge repercussions on my family.
Oof.
And she's walked through a lot of stuff, but she just chooses joy. She wants to be happy in her life. She wants to live in that space. And that's what she's always, every morning she would be singing, her like, good morning
Aww.
song, and so I think some of, a lot, I shouldn't say some of my just general optimism and hope that I carry with me is from my mom, and that choice that she made to live her life that way, and the effect that had on me growing up through the ups and downs. We have to find joy, and like you say, joy is a revolutionary act.
Yeah.
Hope is an action, all of that, especially in this moment right now. So Yeah, once again, I'll just say, crazy, stupid love. Steve Carell, you can't miss.
That was beautiful. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. That was a beautiful story about your mom. I still disagree with you about all rom-com. I'm not a rom-com person, but I love the story about your mom. That's really nice.
All rom-coms? You're
I
not
don't like
down for any?
Not really, no.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan, but that one's a good one. All right. Speaking of good ones, we've got an amazing activist leader who has been in this fight for a long time, and I'm excited for everyone to hear our interview with Kristin Rowe-Finkbeiner. Kristin Rowe-Finkbeiner is the executive director and co-founder of MomsRising. She's also an award-winning author of articles and books, including Keep Marching, How Every Woman Can Take Action and Change Our World. And she's the host of the radio program Breaking Through, powered by MomsRising. Kristin, thank you so much for being here. Third time is a charm.
Thanks for having me. I will tell your listeners, I saw tornadoes. I had bumpy plane rides. I had missed connections in hotels. I'm so thankful to be here with all of you finally. Thank you.
Yeah, I was worried that you would never make it out of Colorado. And now you're in my hometown where I grew up in D.C. So welcome. And I should also say happy belated Mother's Day to you. We talk a lot on our show about finding balance and building resilience in this work. So I'll start off just by asking you, how are you balancing your work with MomsRising in this very difficult moment with your own family and self-care?
That's the best question ever. So one of my answers has been that I am hopeful in my heart and furious in my soul. And so as I'm walking through this disastrous time of democracy, where we're having to rise up time and time and time again to help save the programs that allow us to go to work, to take care of our kids, and to contribute to our communities, being sure that you embrace both the joy and the fury of the moment. And so that means running regularly. For me, that means also lifting weights. I have to dance.
Yeah.
I do art. I've really got to physically get it out because I spend a lot of time in my head thinking about policy.
I have an awesome home gym in our garage, and it is definitely therapy for me to be able to go in there in the morning. Every morning I get on a Zoom like this with some other friends of mine, and we at 6 a.m. and we do a workout that our coach programmed. And the power's been out in my garage for the last 2 days, so I haven't been able to do that. And that's my therapy that I've been missing out on. But
oh, it's so hard. It's so hard when you can't work out. So yeah.
I know. Yeah. Well, that's cool. We just, end the conversation and talk about gym stuff, but that's probably not what most people want to hear about right now. You co-founded Mom.
And that is take time for you. So do you have to schedule time to take time for what works for you? Yes. It sounds like 6 a.m. every day. Do I have to schedule to take time for works for me? Yes. It's about 9 p.m. every night, so not going to be the same type of activity. It's not going to be the same time of day, but make sure that as you are engaging in activism, as you're engaging in really tough conversations over and over again, that you take time for you, and you might have to schedule it. The inverse of that, I think, is also really important. And that is take a break from the news. Sometimes people, they have to stay up to date on everything. Well, that can be somewhat toxic after time. So, maybe also schedule a certain time of day that you check in on the news. Don't be checking in on it and doom scrolling all day. That is also important to health.
That is the best advice. And that's something that I have really done this time around. I mean, we used to have MSNBC on a loop in our house and at work, and, doom scrolling and all of that. And even though I host a political podcast, I managed to stay up to date, on the minute with what's going on without having to watch, people talk about this stuff over and over again, and especially not having to see that orange-faced occupant of the White House, talk or gesticulate or do anything. So I'm with you there, sister. So anyway, you've been doing this a long time. You co-founded MomsRising in 2006, 19 years ago. I think you just celebrated 19 years this month, if I'm correct.
Yes. Yes.
So what were your goals when you started? And as you have been on the front lines of so many important fights over the last 2 decades, how has your mission evolved?
Ooh, excellent question. Mission is the same. So mission is the same: to increase family economic security, stop discrimination, and build a nation where everyone can thrive. That is the North Star. That is what we're going for: a future where we can all thrive. And what's important is, through those years, through that time, we really started out with just a handful of moms talking to moms, person to person, having conversations, hearing what were the most important priorities, what are our contributions, and what are our needs. That's how we got to our policy platform, which we can talk about later. And that policy platform is also a North Star. But one thing is really important. Through moms talking to moms, people talking to people, we've grown from a handful of members to now over 1.2 million members who are active with MomsRising. That means 1 in 300 people in America are active with MomsRising. And as we have been rising, what we've been seeing is that we've been pushing public policies both at the federal level and the state level. And we are marching the policies that we all need toward passage eventually in our nation's capital. Some we have passed. We have had a lot of victories, and we can talk about those, but there are some that we have been fighting for a very long time. That it's no longer, even though we have the malignant Cheeto in the Oval Office, a question of if, but when they will finally pass, because the movement is growing still at such a rapid pace that the what we want to achieve is definitely inevitable.
That's awesome. And I definitely want to hear about what the policies are, but let's put them, of course, in the context of these really twisted, bizarre proposals from the Trump administration, stuff that mirrors Project 2025, of course. And unfortunately, it doesn't get that much attention from mainstream media. And frankly, most of us are like in our own little information bubbles that don't happen to include the pro-natalist and trad wife movement. So, a lot of people don't know what's going on. So I would love for you to break down like what they're proposing and where it all comes from, besides a Margaret Atwood novel.
Yeah, they're proposing a whole salad of weird, ludicrous, and insulting ideas. I'm not even going to call them policies. They're basically ideas. One of their ideas for increasing the birth rate in the United States of America is to teach women about their own menstruation. Hello, who does not already know about that? Like, that is not a thing. I mean, it's ridiculous. And we have a whole bunch of other really weird ideas. Things like a medal for motherhood if you have more than 8 children. Now, we want to look at where that idea comes from.
A physical medal? They're going to send you a
physical medal. Yes. And do you know who else has done a physical medal for motherhood? The Nazi Party. This is something that comes from a lot of authoritarian governments, current and past. And so when we're looking at where these ideas are coming from, there are big questions. Here's the facts. We know from studies that are nonpartisan that what families and our economy really need are things like access to affordable childcare, so parents can go to work, kids can thrive, and childcare workers can earn living wages and stay in their profession. Access to paid family medical leave when a new baby arrives or a serious health crisis strikes, so that people don't get pushed out of much needed jobs when a baby is born, and so that businesses can have consistent people in the labor force and not have supply chain issues. These are win-wins. Access to health care, so that we can have time to get better because everybody gets sick, right? So now take the inverse of this. This is what we need. This is what most other nations already have. And yet, what exactly is the Trump administration and his Republican leadership attacking? Those very same 3 policies that our economy and our families need. So instead of pushing forward and advancing and expanding access to the policies that our economy, our businesses, and our families need, according to actual research, they're pushing forward things like motherhood medals and menstruation education, which is ridiculous. But also the question becomes, why those ideas? And that's where it gets into looking into history and saying, oh, this is pretty scary, actually. It's not just laughable, it's actually a little bit terrifying.
It's a lot terrifying, which is why I try to laugh, because I'm whistling in the graveyard all the time. But it's really twisted, and we're seeing a lot of other things. We're full on authoritarianism right now. This isn't on the bubble. And you co-authored an op-ed in Newsweek last month with Representative Jimmy Gomez about this very thing, about the GOP tax plan, and did a great job of breaking it down. I also like that you co-wrote it with Representative Gomez, because he's, of course, the founder of the Congressional Dads Caucus. And, this pro-natalist movement is no big surprise. Here's spoiler alert for our listeners, primarily led by men. And you've been leading MomsRising for almost 20 years. So I'm curious how you've seen men change around family issues too. Are there good allied men groups that are supporting your work now? Or it really feels like we're backsliding even more so in terms of how young men are coming of age, I guess. So what's been your observation about that in the last 20 years?
Well, MomsRising is for people who are moms and anybody who has ever at any point in their life had a mom. So we like to say anybody with a belly button can be involved, and that includes dads. That includes, people of all genders. So we do actually have a lot of dads and people involved in MomsRising that expand upon the mom community. And so that's good. And so what's happening with men in America? Well, you kind of hit on it a little bit earlier, which is we have very different filter bubbles right now in the United States of America. The information that many of us are getting is quite customized to each individual. And so the filter bubble right now, research is showing, has a strong amount of disinformation and misinformation going particularly to young men and to older men as well, that is not accurately depicting what's happening in America and is actually what I like to call hate spaghetti. What do I mean by hate spaghetti? There's a lot of message testing through misinformation and disinformation of different hateful ideas or topics that are being thrown at the wall to see what sticks and what can be used as a wedge issue to break us apart from one another, to break us apart from our friends, families, and neighbors and our thinking, so that Donald Trump and his MAGA team can grab votes, right? And so people are like, well, what does that mean? That means some pretty scary stuff here too. First of all, cognitively, when we think about humans, hate and fear is twice as sticky as love and happiness. You can remember it twice as often. So it's an effective tool. So the hate spaghetti often works. And then we have to work double hard to get that information that's accurate out there because it's just simply not as sticky. So what we're doing to address this disastrous disinformation and misinformation system that we have right now is creating lots more community groups, lots more places where people can meet up and talk to each other where they are, where people can share their stories. MomsRising has collected over 50,000 stories in the last year alone from people. Wow. We just did a whole storybook delivery to members of Congress. We have members in all states in the nation, and so we delivered storybooks in all states in the nation locally, as well as in our nation's capital. We did over 2,850 stories deliveries to locally to members of Congress. And so sharing our actual story really breaks through that hate spaghetti and really breaks through to people, because it's really about what's happening in our lives. It's not about the headlines.
That's amazing. That's so important. Being in community with each other. Obviously, the divisions have gotten even wider because of COVID, and now more people are working from home and just not together. So anytime you can make those spaces in communities, and yeah, we are so in our bubbles. I as a podcaster, people approach me sometimes and like, I don't have a big platform, but I was thinking of doing some kind of men-centric podcast for progressives. And I'm like, yes, like, doesn't matter how many people you have. We need that algorithm to find more of those voices on there, because the right-wing voices have flooded the zone there. They really own the alternative media space. So the more we can do to put that in the algorithm, the better off we'll be. I will give a plug to Good Men Project, which you may be familiar with. They do really great work. But anyway, on your website, you have some advice from your mom, and I thought it'd be fun. I always ask, maybe we'll combine it, because the last question we always ask our guests is what is giving you hope right now? But I'd love to hear the best advice that you've gotten from your mom that is helping you in this moment right now.
Okay, first, what's giving me hope? The members of MomsRising, who are rising time and time again tirelessly, and they are building a bigger, stronger, bolder movement every day. So incredibly hopeful. The best advice from my mom that you're referring to, I think, is that my mom told me to always try the hard things, but that sometimes it's going to hurt. So one story that I share is that, she kind of said, you might be afraid of taking that dive off the diving board because you might do a belly flop. And in fact, you will probably do a belly flop more than once. And it's going to sting and it's going to hurt. And you're going to get, a little bit of red limbs from the smack of the water. But eventually you will be able to rise up to the surface, swim to the edge of the pool, get out and try again. And eventually you will learn to dive. So don't skip the dive just because you're going to belly flop and it's going to be embarrassing. Keep trying and, keep fighting.
I love that. That's what we will all do together is we'll keep jumping in that pool. I think we all have a pretty sore belly right now, but that will heal and we will get right back in there. So, Kristin, thank you so much. It's so great to speak with you, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, we're back, and as a reminder, we would love to hear from you, hear what you are up to, what you're doing in your activism. We have a call-in number. That's 818-824-4286. You can also reach out on email at hello@practivistpod.com. And we got a call this week from Jill from Chicagoland. And Chicagoland, yay. Let's take a listen.
This is Jill calling in from Chicagoland, and my reason for hope this week is the protest that I just went to. It was Hands Across Chicagoland, and it was a 30-mile long protest along a main road that went from the western suburbs into Chicago, and the numbers I've been hearing is about 18,000 people were out along that one road this afternoon. I personally saw like 100 people at least on the block where I was stationed, and it was really great. I loved that it was both local and regional. It made it accessible and impactful. So keep up the good work. Thanks so much for the podcast. Let's stay strong, everybody.
Oh, wow. I heard about that protest too, and I was like, why is this not getting more coverage in the news? Where is the coverage of this 30-mile long protest? That's incredible.
Incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't hear about it until Jill left that message for us. And to your point, that should be covered like crazy. It's so hard to get earned media coverage from what we're doing. And just a good reminder to everyone out there, like, absolutely share pictures and videos on social media, amplify the work that we're doing, but like stay strong, hold these protests in your heart, because there are more of us and we are doing this, even if the media doesn't always cover it. It's encouraging. It's why Kristi Noem feels like she needs to redefine habeas corpus because she knows we're out in the street fighting for our rights.
Yeah, I think Rachel Maddow did cover it, is my understanding. I don't have cable, so I wouldn't have seen it, but I'm pretty sure she did. But yeah, it's true. If we don't spread the word about this stuff, it just won't get spread. So do it. Spread the word. But as Steve said, yes, also just keep showing up because it is real. It is happening. Other Americans are seeing it, and it's really inspiring. So that was a great call. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you, Jill. And thank you for joining us today. Don't forget, of course, all of the links to the actions that we talked about are in our show notes. So don't just listen, click those links, take action. Please do subscribe, rate, and review our show on Apple, YouTube, or wherever else you find it. Also, and share our show with your friends and family members, of course. That's really important. We want more people taking these actions. If you're able to support our show on Substack, we'd be really grateful for that. And you'll get the ad-free version of our show there. And we'll be back next week, as I said, with Jamie Raskin. So until then, don't forget, hope is an action.
Bye, everybody.